Prince. He is one of the most colorful and creative figures in modern pop culture. Yet he is also one of the most mysterious and perhaps one of the most misunderstood. Prince. The world knows of his musical genius, but knows little about the man. During this program, we'll look back on his early years and get a rare personal glimpse of the real Prince through the eyes of some of the people that knew him best. The cousin Prince formed his first band with. The producer who wrote lyrics for his early songs. The manager responsible for Prince's first recording contract. We'll talk to family, friends, associates, and critics of the budding superstar. We'll hear their remarkable stories as we track the evolution of Prince's genius and capture a memorable portrait of one of pop music's most influential artists, Prince. In 1984, a young and controversial recording artist from Minnesota took the entertainment world by storm with Purple Rain, a best-selling record and movie. Prince had arrived. One man, many instruments, and an empire built on music, sex, salvation, integration, high fashion, hard work, and genius. Musical genius can spring from anywhere, but with Prince, it sprouted in an extremely unlikely place, a Northern American city surrounded by farmland and rivers. Born on June 7th, 1958, the future king of rock slipped into the world at Mount Sinai Hospital in South Minneapolis. The first son of Mattie and John Nelson, who named him Prince Roger Nelson, after his father's jazz trio, the Prince Rogers Trio. At an early age, Prince displayed his own musical talent, first banging on pots and pans, and later learning the themes from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Batman on his dad's piano. Music, no doubt, provided the young Prince with some much-needed comfort when his parents divorced, and he was shuttled around between homes of friends and relatives. It was in this house in North Minneapolis where Prince finally found a home and a surrogate mother, Bernadette Anderson. Here he joined musical forces with Bernadette's son, Andre, and Prince's cousin, Chaz Smith.
So we grew up really tight and started playing. He played piano and I played drums. And we kind of kicking it around the house a lot, you know, making noise and trying to sound like Michael Jackson. 11 years old, we weren't supposed to go to Parade Stadium to see Sly and the Family Stone. We went anyways, and they had cut through the fence, and we snuck in. We weren't even supposed to be in there, but then that's when I think we all looked at each other and said we wanted to do this for a living.
Black radio, or the lack of it in the Twin Cities, helped shape Prince's early music. The only funk or modern R&B he heard came from a poorly powered community radio station called KMOJ.
Grand Central was derived from the group Grand Funk, actually, because we played a lot of their music. They had an album out called Flight to Phoenix. For white guys, they were so funky. I mean, they had the power of the guitar player doing all the chords and doing solos at the same time. Mark Farner controlled the band, and that's what Prince wanted, and that's what we liked about it, man. It was so cool. Oh.
Places for a band of underage black kids to play in were few and far between.
Basically, we could only get handout gigs, we called them. Like, we'd set up in the backyard of our next door neighbors and just start playing at 9 o'clock at night, and there would be so many people in the yard, the police have to be called. And they'd have to disband us, or people would see us and they'd go, will you play at our wedding, or will you play at the YMCA? We always played for Andre's mother because she worked at the YWCA, so whenever there were gigs, even if we didn't want to do them, she'd say, you guys are playing March 3rd at the Y. Okay, we'll be there. The band everybody started maturing and getting kind of big-headed. And an incident I remember specifically that Prince wanted to be the leader. At first it was all of us one for all, and all for one. It seemed we wanted to bring in another member from Flight Time that was having problems with him. His name is David Island. They call him Batman. We wanted to get him because he's an incredibly talented saxophone player to this day. But we wanted him in the band, and we went to Prince to get him in. We said, man, this would be a great opportunity to get this guy in the group. And Prince said no. And we kind of then said, oh, if Prince doesn't want him, well, then we, you know. And from then on, Prince kind of realized that the power that he had harnessed. We didn't really know that we were actually giving it to him, but we really did let him know that, like, man, if I quit, if he quits, then it's whatever he says goes.
The growing pains continued. Before long, Chaz was replaced on drums by a brash new kid at school named Morris Day.
One day I come from football practice and my drums are moved over, and Morris's little wood set that I seen in his house was there. And of course I was devastated because these were like my brothers. And
the band was Grand Central, consists of William Dowdy, which he was the percussionist, Linda Anderson, which was Andre Anderson's sister, was keyboard player. Morris Day was on the drums. Andre Anderson was on bass, and Prince Rogers Nelson was on guitar. And I remember working with them the first day, and I asked them to play me one of their songs. And they sang a song, I don't remember the name of it, and everybody was saying words different. Everybody was saying something different. You know, like, you remind me of me, and this guy's going, well, you remind me of she, and this guy, you remind me of he. You know, it wasn't those words, but that's just an example. And I made them all put down their instruments and come forward. And I asked Prince, I says, well, Prince, just grab your guitar. We'll do the guitar and we'll do vocals so that we can work on harmonies and getting those things right. And Prince started playing and we started singing and things like that. And this is how we really started getting the group really tight.
Chris Moon, a flamboyant would-be music producer, was searching for a collaborator while recording bands for free on a 4-track recorder in his basement.
And at the time there was a group in the studio recording called Champagne. And Andre Simone and Prince and, you know, the whole group. And so I pulled Prince aside after a session one day, and I said, look, I got this idea. I'd like to sit down and talk to you about it. So he came back that evening after the group had left, and we started talking deals. My idea is that, hey, why don't we get together, why don't we team up, combine our resources, combine our talents, and I'll teach you how to record, and I'll teach you how to produce, and I'll teach you everything I know, and, you know, I'll produce a demo tape for you. And if it goes somewhere, great. If it doesn't, you know, then we've both learned from the process. But if we get something out there, I don't want to contract with you. I don't want to put any of this on paper because I want this an agreement of the heart, not agreement of the paper. And if something goes somewhere, all I want is just that you credit my name on the songs that you end up using. And I think that he thought 2 or 3 fractions of a second and nodded his head. I recall there wasn't a long oratory response to the question, just a head nod. And that was the beginning of the agreement. So I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keychain, and here was this little 16-year-old, you know, afro-headed, 5-foot black kid from the north side that I didn't know very well, and I handed him my key. And I said, here's the key to the studio. You let yourself in after school. You come over here and practice, and then when I get back, we'll sit down and we'll work on stuff together, and I'll leave lyrics on the piano, and if you find any you like, work on them. And I remember Prince kind of looked at me a little shocked when I handed him the key, because that was really a good gesture of trust and faith on that part, and he never betrayed it. He was always, you know, very, very reliable and punctual. After I taught him how to record, it was really funny. I'd reach up to the board and turn up a little treble, and then he'd reach up to the board and turn down a little treble. Then I'd reach up to the board and turn up an instrument, and he'd reach up to the board and turn down a different instrument. And so our hands were all over the place. It was like this octopus had spawned in the studio and had become a recording engineer. So even from the beginning, he had a lot of input, a lot of sense on the tonal textures, the balance, the way the sounds fit together, and he wanted to express that input. And I think as soon as he learned how to operate that equipment, he had the means to do that. Our focus was always to push the envelope of normality and try and get into things that we wouldn't normally do. We would bring flute players in for funk songs, and we'd use obscure instruments. We'd tune the drums all weird and slow the tape down, and anything that was not natural, not a normal process within the recording system back then, we would be playing with.
Prince's hunger for a recording contract increased as his immense talent became more apparent.
Prince came back from New York after I'd lined him up with his first record company meeting, and both of us were a little astounded that the record company hadn't heard a hit. We thought, well, we can hear it, how come they can't hear it? And so then the question became, what are we going to do to market you, Prince, now that you know, our one main shot hasn't quite materialized the way we had hoped. And so I decided that what I needed to do was to try and find some talent, some managerial type talent here in town that I could use that would help me to promote this artist. And there was one gentleman named Owen Husney who was with a company that promoted folk artists. And I'd always liked Owen, we'd always got along pretty well, and he'd always struck me as a very professional, kind of responsible individual. He was a businessman, he was doing this on an ongoing basis, he had experience, he had a suit. And I thought that was important, that we could put somebody in a suit in front of the record company and have that kind of a presentation. So I went over to Owen and took my tape under my arm and sat down with him and I said, look, I got something I want to share with you here.
Finally, after 5 days of him sitting on my couch in my reception area, I said, come on in. And he plays this tape. And I said, it's great, it's unbelievable, who's the group? And he said, sit down. And I said, what do you mean? He said, sit down. So I said, well, who's the group? You gotta tell me who the group is, we have to get to them. He said, it's not. He said, it's one guy writing everything, singing everything, playing all the instruments. And I just looked at him, you know, in my business-like manner, and I said, does he live here? Does he live in Minneapolis? Well, when Chris Moon brought him over to my house for that first meeting, what I saw was a young kid who had a certain look in his eye. Now, I've seen, if you ever see the early Little Richard photographs, they're sort of this, the rest of the group, he was in this group, and I can't remember right now what the name of the group was, I think before he became Little Richard. And there are all these guys sitting there in this group, and they're sort of like looking off here, and they're looking up here, and they're smiling for that nice little photograph. And then there's that Little Richard picture, and those eyes are dead on, and there's fire in those eyes, and there is that, you know, that I am going to make it look, and I know what I've got, and I'm getting there kind of look. Well, I saw that. The minute Prince walked in my door, I saw that look in his eyes, and I knew that this was the real deal. I found him to be extremely intelligent, and that, again, that's, I think, when I saw how well focused he was and how intelligent he was, and the fact that he was like 16 or 17 then or whatever, but he had the mind of like a 35-year-old, and that's how focused he was. That's when I made a decision that I was going to leave whatever. I owned 3 companies at that time, and I made a decision to walk away from those 3 companies and devote my life to them.
Husney started to work immediately on the marketing of Prince.
And my first thing was to, you know, not sign him to some local record label and do some local schmokel kind of deal. But my first belief was, okay, we've got to do something here, and we got to get our rear ends out to the West Coast. We got to make a record deal for him as soon as possible, and it has to be first class. So we got on the plane and we went out there and we had our top #1 attorney in the town. So we were first class all the way. Nothing was going to stop us. And we made presentations to all these labels, and we did present to ABC, RSO, Warner Brothers, CBS Records, and A&M Records. I do still have the letter of rejection from Al Corey at RSO Records that passed on him, saying that, you know, they didn't feel that he was a talent. I do have a letter, I can't find the letter from ABC, but A&M, CBS, and Warner Brothers all offered us deals almost on the spot. Not quite, but it was almost on the spot. And so I got on a plane, came back to Minneapolis, and I can remember here I was, this guy from this little, everybody thought was a cow town. They couldn't even figure out how did you guys from this little cow town in the frigid north with no black people, why were you out here with this young black kid presenting this tape? And after they heard the tape, it was unbelievable. So, make a long story short, I came back to Minneapolis and I have the heads of all these record labels. I'm just this little guy from this cow town, right? My phone is ringing off the hook with the heads of all these major record companies. It was, for me, it was a dream come true. The deal that we came away with was a pretty spectacular deal for that time. The money was well into the six figures. In fact, if you added everything up together, it was over $1 million for that time, if you added in all the records and all the advances and everything. So we march off to Sausalito, and making this record at I believe it was the record plant in Sausalito. And I got this nice home built into the side of this mountain, and Prince and myself and my wife and Andre Simone get on a plane and move out there and set up shop, and Andre and Prince are living with us, and our relationship was sort of surrogate parents at that point. I mean, we were cooking and cleaning and doing the hair and, washing the floors and doing the sheets, and I was managing them at the same time. I can remember at one point all these honchos from Los Angeles came up to San Francisco to see how we were doing in the studio, check up on us, because they left us alone to our own devices. And so I believe it was the president of Warner Brothers and Russ Thyrett, who was the VP of, he's now a senior VP of promotion at that time, I believe, two very big people within the company, fly up to San Francisco to see how we're doing. And I can remember walking in the studio, and Prince is working away in the control room, and he's there listening to a playback of some down-tempo song, and there was no bass. Prince didn't want any bass in the song, so I remember Lenny said to him something like, well, shouldn't there be a bass guitar in that song? And Prince looks at him and he says, "That's it, out, all of you out now, get out, that's it." And so I'm out in the lobby of the studio going, well, don't worry about him, he's really a good guy, Because here he's throwing the whole entourage from Warner Brothers out. Prince was right, and he was right in what he was doing, and nobody was going to get in his way to doing it.
Warner Brothers wanted Prince to put together a band from California. Instead, Prince went back home and started putting things together there.
All of a sudden, Prince got to deal with Warner Brothers, and they were down in Owens. Owen had a studio down by, where's that, Loring Park. So Prince had me come down there, and I get down there, and he's got like drums and everything set up. Just came back from playing with Fleetwood Mac and everything. I was like, wow, man, all our dreams. He had met Santana, and he said he was doing an album and everything, and I was like, yeah. And I seen everything all, for proof. I seen what was going on, promotion and all this stuff, and I said, wow, man, this is pretty incredible. He said, you want to be in a group? And I said, again, yeah, I'll do it. So we got Andre back, and the whole band was kind of practicing on the side.
Started working close together with Owen, doing little things at first. They needed a rehearsal space, so I gave up my home for them to rehearse and form the band at my house. Andre was immediately in the band, you know what I mean, because they lived together. So that worked out fine for them. Bobby Z was his drummer. Not that he was a great drummer, it was because he was a white drummer. And Prince wanted a mixed group because there were a lot of better drummers around at the time than Bobby Z. Not saying that he wasn't a good drummer, but there were a lot other better ones that Prince could have taken, but they were black, And one of them was Chaz, his own cousin, which is a great drummer, but he didn't want a black drummer.
Bobby and I had gotten a confrontation about it, and Bobby said if I made it, I would be making it selling records behind the record shop, in the store, and he'd be the one. I mean, it got that kind of little touchy, and Prince allowed him to say that to me, and I thought it was kind of really weird, being that I'd known him all my life, and we've been buddies, and that kind of thing came down.
They rehearsed long hours. I'm serious. I mean, Prince had these guys working. He had them complaining because he was working them so hard. They'd start off around 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, and around 10 or 11 o'clock at night, they were just finishing up. you know, everybody. There was Matt Fink, Bobby Z, Andre Simone, Des Dickerson, Gail Chapman, and of course Prince.
Prince's would-be coming out showcase gig was at the Capri Theater, I think in the early January of 78 or 79, and it was mostly a showcase for the record company to see what he could do, so they flew in all of these California-baked studio execs from Warner Brothers, put him up in this dilapidated, poorly heated theater on the north side called the Capri.
That night we were there at the door taking the tickets and doing all that kind of stuff.
I came in late because I had to get Prince's boots shined.
Didn't Mo Austin come?
We had the Warner
Well,
Brothers.
didn't
Mo Austin was here, man.
I know Barry Gross was here, and I know
Mo Austin
Russ
came
Direct.
because them guys came at the Russ there, and them guys came at the
Right.
same time. Came in a limo, that's right. They had the Warner Brothers jackets on. Did any of you guys get a chance to talk to Prince before he went on? Where was he? Does anybody know? Because I caught him in the bathroom. I seen him when he was just getting ready to go when he was in the bathroom. He was scared to death.
I thought he was like backstage or something.
Scared to death.
The KMOJ announcer that night sounded downright prophetic. When introducing Prince, the DJ proclaimed the power and the glory, the Minneapolis story, Prince. The send-up, unfortunately, was better than the performance.
Prince came out and performed. You know, there were a few little girls screaming and stuff, but for the most part, it was a very unremarkable, unmemorable show. The thing that struck me most about it was that how wild Prince and Andre and Des Dickerson all looked, and yet how uneven Prince's showmanship was. It was far below what it would be even a year later when the second album came out. But I can remember for the encore, he just kind of walked on stage and said in this very deep voice, which I think took everybody by surprise, you know, if you don't make some more noise, we're just not going to play. And it was like, well, who cares? I think everybody had seen enough and had known enough that he wasn't ready for any sort of concert tour or record tour.
And I actually rode home with Prince that night, and Warner Brothers didn't feel like they were ready to go on tour, which I was kind of happy in a way. And then in a way, Prince was so devastated that he actually looked like he was going to cry, because it would look like the end of the world because they didn't accept the band wasn't ready. And I kept saying, man, even though to my displeasure of not playing, I still was pumping him, going, man, that doesn't mean anything. You'll go back. That doesn't mean nothing because they're not ready for the band now. I mean, hey, go back and do some more stuff. And that night was probably the last night I really had a real communication with him and seen some sensitivity. It was because it devastated him that he thought the band was groomed enough, and Warner said.
And Prince, I think, wanted it to happen faster, and because we had all deluded ourselves with this whole deal that we were going to be multimillionaires, when it didn't happen the way that we wanted it and needed it to happen at that time, I think we all became very disappointed, and we started to wear on each other.
I don't think it was Prince that was changing that much as the people that were around him that were changing. His popularity was growing very quickly, and some of his friends, they wouldn't talk to him the same way as they talked to him before. It wasn't like, hey Prince, how you doing, man? How's it going? It would be like, Prince, wow, yeah, man, how's it going, man? It was a different, I can't even do it right, but they looked at him in awe. They looked at him as a star rather than looking at him as a human being who had a job in the music industry.
If you remember, after the first album came out and it did just so, here we are sitting around sort of licking our wounds and saying, well, and I'm coming up with that manager talk, you know, well, that was a good first start, you know, blah, 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 this and that. Our relationship at that point started to deteriorate just a little bit because the lines between sort of being his surrogate parents and being a manager and being able to draw the boundaries between all that and bring him information that he needed to know and the reality blows of the business, and at the same time sort of be his father figure, really were wearing thin on all of us. And at that time, he was getting a little upset about all this. And then bang, we're sitting there, and this record, Funky Town, comes out by this young white kid from Minneapolis. And all of a sudden, we're looking at the charts. We said, wait a minute. This other record from this young white kid just went #1 on the black charts, on the urban charts. Then it went #1 on the pop charts. Then it went #1 on the dance charts. Then it goes #1 every free country on earth.
They called me and said, by the way, it sold 23,000 albums in New York the first day it came out. I said, is that good? I didn't know. They said, that is good. You got a monster.
I don't know if Prince will ever cop to this, but I think that record served to propel him. I know it caught him. It had to. I think that served to propel him on to really do what he had to do.
But things were changing in Prince's court.
When Owen Husney and Prince broke up, you know, it was kind of an emotional letdown for me because Owen did a lot, you know, for Prince, you know. Maybe Prince outgrew him or something like that, you know, because Owen was running the ad company and being a manager at the same time. And maybe Prince was kind of like telling Owen to do little minor things like space heaters and, you know, little things like that, just to pick at him just a little bit, to get him to do something. But I don't think Prince really knew what he wanted Owen to do. You know what I mean? It was like he knew that he needed a manager, but for what reason, you know, he was too young to know.
We were so close at the time that I think I liken it more to breaking up of a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship rather than a manager-artist, you know, saying, screw you, get out of here, get out of here. There was a little bit of that, but there was a lot of emotion and I think a lot of hurt on both sides when we split up, because there was a lot of time invested, and there was a lot of time invested for both of us into the relationship on a business and a friendship level. And I think that made it tougher emotionally for us to part, other than just being some, you know, business issue. So it was tough, and it wound up, you know, it wound up where we both just left each other alone after that. It wasn't this thing of constant berating each other, doing anything. And I would never say anything negative about him because I do believe in what he does, and I'm a firm believer in his genius.
The second record, which I think was called Prince, was a little hint, I think, of what he could do commercially. I think it was probably his most self-consciously commercial record. He played again at a downtown theater called the Orpheum, which was sold out, and the difference in performances was night and day. I mean, Prince had basically come out of his shell. He reminded me of Jimi Hendrix and Sly Stone, but it was so rockified that you know, I'd never really seen anything quite like it. And I remember my date at the time was beside herself, and this was a supposedly mature woman who was like on the edge of her seat and just about ready to scream herself. And it was a really electrified performance. Prince prancing around in his bikini underwear and his leg warmers. He still had the big afro, although he was starting to comb it down a little bit, more in a Beatles style cut now than the straight afro. But it was a sign of things to come, and it was a vast improvement, and from there it just got better.
But then came Dirty Mind, and you put on this album, Dirty Mind, and you're just blown away. It's the funkiest, rawest grooving record that has ever come out of this town, that will ever come out of this town.
Dirty Mind, which, I mean, just broke down all the doors, sexually explicit lyrics, the look, the sound of the thing, and then the multiracial, multi-gender appeal. I mean, it was a record that just crossed all the taboos and rewrote the map for where people should go musically.
Controversy followed Dirty Mind, touching again on the taboo themes of sexuality, with allusions to politics and religious imagery too.
1999 put him on the charts, It was a phenomenal record, a double album. It really showed what a command he had of the studio, and it also expanded him musically into some jazzier things and some very experimental pop directions. Also yielded the biggest single to that point, Little Red Corvette.
Charged with destiny now, Prince and his band began a series of surprise gigs at First Avenue.
You could probably compare it to, I don't know, the Beatles going on the roof at Abbey Road or something, and here, you know, Prince would routinely show up at First Avenue either to hang out or to do gigs, and it became a big deal to be there. It was becoming clearer and clearer that this guy was a major talent, prolific beyond belief, and a tantalizing performer, the likes of which you probably hadn't seen since Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, he played here. I forget the acts. That was the time U2 played here a couple times. REM first played here in the early 80s. That's REM, U2, Billy Idol, English Beats. There was a lot of shows going on at the time. But apparently something clicked because he picked up on the club in terms of wanting to play here every now and then for these unannounced shows.
With 1999 a critical and commercial success, Prince began conquering America, then England and Japan. Rolling Stone named him Artist of the Year in 1982.
The stage was set for Purple Rain. There had been talk for a year that Prince was writing a movie when he was on tour for the 1999 album. I know that the Warner Brothers film division thought, this is something we have to do, let's do it, let's get it out. All of a sudden they had an $80 million US hit. Well, it went on to make almost as much money worldwide. The record took off. He was all over the radio that summer in 1984.
With the release of Purple Rain, Prince was vaulted into superstardom. His royal badness became a household name. He was no longer the quiet kid on the street, hungry for a record deal.
It's pretty bizarre. You really couldn't talk to him after that. Because then he went through different management changes. I remember seeing him with his new managers after Owen, and they actually put their hands on me so that I couldn't talk to him. Me and Andre had seen him in Dayton's and stuff, and we thought he looked a little cute. He had some little pink pants on, some little boots, and a little pink scarf. And this is when he was starting to look like he was getting really far out. We were far out, but he was like, seemed like he was distant emotionally. And it was those characters he were around, because I know he didn't want to trust them. We didn't like him from the beginning, but then I knew he was getting like even further out as far as like dealing with the people that he knew. And so then I didn't see Pepe around anymore. I didn't see, Matt and them guys really never said anything, but Des wasn't in the group anymore. Gail had left, the original keyboardist, and I had brought her to the band. And she didn't like what's going on, because basically everybody he had in his band were really honest, hard-working people. They weren't people that liked Prince because he was Prince. They loved him because they seen the genius and the talent, and they was willing to sacrifice everything. That's everybody, and I ain't lying. Everybody sacrificed everything so that they could see that work, because they knew it would benefit all. And that's the bottom line. They didn't want anything at all extra special. Everybody, including Owen, believed in that man's genius.
I kind of like didn't want to work for Prince at this time, because he was getting a little star-itis, is what I called it. You know, and I've seen it happen in a lot of groups and a lot of people throughout my life, you know. And I didn't want to be catering to him. I do anything for him, you know, because I wanted to do it, but not because he wanted me to do it.
You know what's funny, as I look back, I think about, there was a whole group there, and I think about why I selected Prince. And I'd love to tell you, I knew he was a star. You know, I sensed that he had a lot of ability, but funnily enough, one of the reasons I selected Prince was he seemed like he didn't have too big an ego and he'd be easy to work with. He was easy to work with.
Used to get some of his fan mail. And this is something that he didn't understand, you know. Girls would write him letters, And they put in there how much they loved him, how much they loved his music. They send gifts, little necklaces, rings and everything, you know, gold-plated things, you know, not the real expensive stuff, you know. And pictures they'd send, and little letters like, I want you to marry me, and things like that. And I'd show him the Prince and stuff like that. And he would go like, gee, this is like, how could these people don't even know me? You know, how could they love me? You know, I'm saying, hey man, they like your music. They like what you're doing. They like what you're saying.
So we started looking at what name we should use for Prince. And I remember one evening we had a long discussion because Prince wanted to be Prince Nelson. He says, you know, that's my name. That's who I'm going to be. And for days I said, look, you know, there is only one. If you go out and we get you out there and we make you famous, there is only one Prince. There's never been another Prince. We don't need the Nelson. Ooh, I don't know, that's my name. But eventually he came around, and we ended up with an artist named Prince.
We wrote a song together called Just Another Sucker. And I remember it very well. We was at my house on 3809 Upton. And I had the music, I wrote the music, and I played it for him. And he said, wow, man, he really liked it. And then he put some guitar stuff on it, which really enhanced it, and I liked what he did. And then he went home. It was around 9 o'clock at night or something like that. And around 4 o'clock in the morning, he calls me up and the phone is ringing. I'm asleep. And I go, hello, what's up, you know? And it's Prince, Peppy, wide awake. I finished that song, man. I didn't want to let him down and go, man, do you know what time it is? It's like 4 o'clock in the morning. I didn't want to do anything like that, so I just said, wow, that's really great. You know, I mean, I could care less. I mean, I really cared, but I could have waited till the morning.
Another thing he'd do is go through red lights, you know, drive through red lights with his very first car. He would drive through a red light with us in the car, sort of like a dare type thing, and I'd have to pray for him to stop. Prince, please let me out of the car, please. Can you, please, man, just let me out right on the corner. I don't care, man, I don't. And he would just look at me like he had some kind of magic. I swear to God, like he knew that no cars were gonna hit him when we went through this red light. And I didn't like that though. That was too much for me. I was like, hey, okay, I can go along with the mythology, hey, but this is like, you know, so that's the kind of guy he was.
Because he sang in a falsetto voice, I don't think that he had fully gained the confidence of the acceptance of that kind of a voice. And so he would tend to sing very quietly. And I remember I was always in the control room. I didn't have the world's best equipment. And I was shoving all the faders all the way up and trying to get his, you know, turning everything up I could and having him move closer to the mic and trying to get a little more volume so that I could see some needle fluctuations on the VU meters. And I was just not getting enough level. It was really an equipment deficiency more than anything else. And so I had to get Prince to sing louder. And so one of the ideas that I tried, I said, look, we're gonna scratch the approach we've been doing. We're gonna try something new here. So I laid pillows down on the floor in the studio, and I had him lay down, and I put the microphone virtually in his mouth, and then we turned off all the lights. And I said, now I'm just gonna leave you laying there for a little while just to kind of get relaxed. And we put some headphones on him. And there I am in the control room, pitch black, you know, with this match, trying to find out where the right buttons are. And there's Prince out there somewhere, laying down on the floor with this microphone in his mouth. And I start rolling the tape, and all of a sudden, I get a louder voice. And I think, this is it. I've found the magic.
Prince really conjured the whole Purple Rain mythology, I think, in order for him to be able to survive and to break through. Because in fact, Prince grew up in a Minneapolis where there were no creative outlets for his music. There were really no models for the kind of music he was drawn to make. He had to fashion it as he went along, and he, in the process, fashioned a whole world.
When Purple Rain was filmed, all the tourists came in. Is Prince there? I could have Sonny Ade or Neville Brothers on stage, and people, who the cares, you know? I mean, they want to see Prince. Is he around? And you'd say, but look, this is the Neville Brothers, they're great.
It wasn't that he changed. It was the people around him that changed. And I think later on, because he could get anything he wanted from people, that it affected him. You know, whether it's good, whether it's bad, that's for who to say, who knows. You know, but I think that he started really feeding off of other people wanting to do things for him. You know, at first you would go, no, 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 man, I do that, I'll do it. But then, you know, when you get 10, 15, 20 people who want to do stuff for you all the time, then you go, oh, okay, okay. You know, and then it just gets to a point where he didn't have to do anything anymore but his music.
Prince came up at a time when the playlists on radio were as drastically segregated as they'd been any time since the early 60s. And he really played a vital role in spirit and in direct lineage in helping to break down those barriers. Michael Jackson and Thriller get most of the credit for breaking down the barriers that had sprouted up at radio. But I really think Prince and his whole kind of crossover project from Dirty Mind onward also had a great deal to do with that. I mean, he simply refused to admit of any kind of stylistic boundaries, and I think that had a really healthy effect on what was becoming a more and more segregated musical set of playlists at the time.
I remember there was always a very deep sense that he had to compete with Michael Jackson. That was his only competition, and that there was enough closeness in style that he had to peg out his own territory.
I believe that he had a lot of musical influences, but I believe that Prince was not the type of person to be influenced and sort of stuck emulating that kind of person. I believe that he was the kind of talent that could take a liking to a particular artist and take what they were doing to the next level.
Nobody who's been on the scene in the past 20 years recombines musical elements as freely and as creatively as Prince has at times. But at the same time, if you look at the really stellar musical careers of the 20th century, you find that there are sustained collaborative relationships that happen. With Duke Ellington, it's Billy Strayhorn. With James Brown, it's a series of sidemen who got less creative credit in his career than they really deserved, but they were there long term, and they really contributed a lot to his sound and his sensibility. The interesting thing about Prince, and in some ways the tragedy of Prince, is that he has never been able to sustain those relationships. He grew up isolated. He developed this vision of where he wanted to go and who he wanted to be, and he invented himself in that mold. And that attitude toward life and toward his career served him really well for a really long time. But at this juncture in his career, speaking in 1992, I wonder if he hasn't gotten to the point where he's beginning to run dry. He's beginning to lose his own self-critical faculties because he doesn't have stable relationships with other people who can afford to be honest with him and who can input ideas that he'll respect and work with.
But I think in the years to come, he will always be successful because that's the kind of songs he writes. He just doesn't write love songs. He writes songs about life, about real things, whether you like it or whether you don't, whether it's about incest or whether it's about God. You know, you either like it or you don't like it, but it's facts.
In my opinion, he should be looked at as the most significant artist of the 80s because he pumped in a phenomenal energy into this black music thing. He kind of fused rock and jazz and funk and pop together and made it into a thing that sounded really acceptable to everybody.
Prince will be looked upon, I think, in the same regard as a lot of the pioneers and the superstars from of the last 50 years, you know, with Presley and the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Little Richard. Prince will be in the top 10, if you will.
Even though he is recognized worldwide and his name is known by, you know, every household that exists today almost around the world, that people really don't understand him in total. And I feel that, I personally feel from seeing him do other things and knowing what Prince is capable of, that he is a modern-day Mozart or Beethoven, if you may, that his genius has yet to be discovered.
I named my dog after him. I had got a dog a guy gave me around the lake, Samoan Husky. I brought him home. He was a nice little old puppy, a nice little white puppy. And they used to act, I'd come in the door and Prince asked me, what's the dog's name? You know, he was on his way to rehearsal down in the basement. And I go, I didn't have a name for the dog because I just got him about 20 minutes ago. So I said, his name is Rinse. Yeah, that's his name. His name is Rinse. Prince without the P. And he said, oh, I like that.
I remember the first time I went to see Purple Rain. And I walked in and I sat down in this movie theater, packed with people. And here's Prince's head, 40 feet tall. And everybody's just saying, God, that's incredible. And to me, I saw that movie unlike anybody else in the world. Because to me, we were still in the studio working together and doing that thing. And what I saw on the screen was not this huge superstar, but I saw this kid that achieved his goal.
I think the only thing people worry about is that he might end up to be the Howard Hughes of rock and roll, because he's got such a reclusive personality to begin with, and does seem to genuinely like to be left alone, and has always seemed driven in whatever he does, and demands a lot of other people, but I don't think any more than what he demands of himself.
His career, it speaks for itself, really. I mean, what can I add to it? It's been a genius career. I mean, I don't know really, only thing I could think that he could do, probably his next move is to come back and go like, man, why don't you guys come out to my pool, man? I got a pool full of beers. Come on, I got a basketball court in my house. Why don't you guys come on, let's play some basketball, drink some brewskis, and watch the Bulls. That's all I think is left out of his whole thing, and him to be happy, because I don't think it'd be very much fun leaving all of it. Look at Pepe and all of us are still together. We communicate with Andre, all the old band members, Jesse, everybody still, talks to one another, and we need each other. And I think that's really, to be out there where he's at by himself's got to be pretty scary. So I feel for his future in that sense. Got to come back home, see? Because I talked to his mom and everybody, and it's deeper than just the music thing. You just got to come on home, man, And then I could see him going on and, even doing things that David Bowie and people couldn't even dream of doing, or Hendrix. So, yeah.